Hey, welcome back to Unschooled Theology. Today, I am one of your hosts, Derick, and with me is the other host, Evan. Good day to you, sir.
Good day to you, sir. How we doing?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Doing wonderful.
All right. Let's get started here. We are moving on now to Genesis 2:8. And the Lord planted a garden in Eden in the east, and there he put the man whom he had formed. A couple things to take from this verse. And what I wanted to start with is the idea of a garden.
Mhm.
That's again, we go to this idea of this is all a choice that God made. And so
Mhm.
why these choices, right? So with a garden, the first thing I want to start with mentioning, just because it's worth recognizing here, is in the English, obviously there's some similarity between the word guard and
Mhm.
garden. They
Mhm.
sound similar. And in a way, there's a crossover with the meaning there.
Mhm.
Same is true in Hebrew, that a
Mm.
garden is related to the idea of guarding or defending something. The words
Really
overlap.
interesting.
Um, and what we can do is take that sense of the word garden and apply that idea to it. And we realize that what a garden is a garden is a place that is defended from the wilderness,
Mhm.
if you will. And so a garden, it's comprised of plants, same as the wilderness. It's just that these plants have been tamed now. Or another way of thinking this, aligning with everything we've discussed so far leading up to this point in Genesis, we might think of it as the idea of the chaos of the wilderness now being brought into a sense of order, right? So a garden is the cultivation of nature. It's not the destruction of it, but rather it is nature. It's just a more clearly ordered dynamic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. It feels like this place where it's not as distinct as, say, a city. I feel like you have two options where you could go. You could go all the way to a city where it's almost absent
Well,
from nature and it's this full complete organization, or you can go in the other direction towards something akin to a forest in which it's nature completely unrestricted and completely
yes.
unbound and open to any sort of what nature is. A garden is the point at which some sort of intelligence interacts with nature and begins to,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think order is really the proper term, is to put that chaos into some sort of order, but not so ordered that it's completely void of any sort of spontaneity, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
that comes along with nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll get more to the city when we get into Cain, because you'll remember
Yeah,
that
of
Cain
course.
founds a city. So we'll get to what
Uh-huh.
that sort of symbolizes
Mm-hmm.
um, in a moment. But this is a garden here. Is sort of symbolically the idea of man bringing order to nature. This is
Mm-hmm.
nature should exist. It shouldn't be destroyed, but it should have an order to it, and
Yeah.
that man is responsible for gardening, protecting
Mm-hmm.
against the wilderness.
Yeah.
And so I want to throw in too, some commentators suggest that we might also think of this verse as describing an orchard. That's one of the other ways you could go with this word, is that it's very specifically like a garden, but also an orchard with trees.
Mm.
And I'm going to throw that out there for now. We're going to look at that more closely once we get to the idea of trees in a couple of episodes.
Yeah.
But it's worth knowing that that is another meaning of this word, is an orchard
So the Hebrew
specifically.
word is more typically references orchard.
It references both,
Okay. Okay, that
right?
makes
But
sense.
trees are specifically uh, uh, something you want to think about, I think, when it comes to this kind of a garden.
Yeah.
And then the other way this word, and this will wrap up the episode with this, the other way to think of this word that's brought up regularly is the idea of it being a nursery garden. So it might
Mm.
not be a like a fully formed garden. It's a garden where we grow the plants to then ship them out, if you will.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that is an interesting way to think of it. If we think of this idea where we talk about the Bible following the story of the maturation of humanity, right? Because perhaps the nursery garden aspect of this was to prepare man to now head out into the world.
Yeah. Well, and also potentially that this system that's being established is intended to be replicated elsewhere. That gardening is not restricted just to the Garden of Eden. It's intended to be spread out,
right?
And done with the entirety of the earth.
Yeah, other places
that
as well.
Philosophy, is intended to go elsewhere. I think it's worth noting that God doesn't command man to plant the garden, but God initiates the garden.
Right.
And then man's entrusted with continuing the process.
Yes.
So there's a way in which it's a passing of the baton. It's not that he just says, man, go and do this. He says, no, this is the design that I'm going to establish. And then your job is to continue what I'm starting. Which
reflects the way we were looking at Genesis 1 as well.
Exactly. Yeah. It feels like that keeps being reinforced, that
God
establishes some sort of example of here is how you do this. And then humanity is intended to imitate that.
Right.
Which I think is really powerful.
Yeah. All right. So we'll wrap this episode up there, just discussing the idea of a garden, what that means. And next time we're going to look at this idea of Eden being in the east here, or more specifically, the garden being set in the east of Eden. So we're going to look at that closer next time. Until then, be sure to subscribe, like, rate, and review. If you're doing the podcast, shoot us an email, unschooledtheology@protonmail.com. And let us know what you think, any thoughts you might have, questions, and we will be back for another episode soon. Thanks.